Alright everyone, Cowboy Trades here, welcome back to the channel for another update on Bitcoin. So, in our last Bitcoin update, we were letting you know that we are short-term bullish until Bitcoin hits the price target of this falling wedge all the way up here at 31,000. Now, in the past 24 hours, we've come up to 31,000 and it's looking like we're having a sharp rejection. So I want to provide a quick update. I want to let you know, am I still short-term bullish on Bitcoin? What are my updated price targets and thoughts on the markets now we've hit 31,000 and it looks like we're moving back down to the downside. However, before we update what's happening in the lower time frames, talk about my price targets and what are my thoughts in the immediate short term, I want to provide you with an update on my bull market checklist. This is a video I did about 9 months ago in which I was detailing a bunch of different things that I've got my eyes on which are going to help me gauge whether Bitcoin is in a bull market or a bear market. Now, there are 7 different things on this checklist. 3 of them have already been ticked off, and if all 7 of these items on the list are ticked off, then I will be believing that Bitcoin is moving into a new bull market. Now, of course, if we don't tick off all of these 7 boxes, then I am still believing that Bitcoin is due for lower price targets. So let's talk about this bull market checklist quickly, and then we'll dive into what's happening in the lower time frames. So number 1, Bitcoin needs to be trading above the 200-week moving average, currently at 26,700. Tick. Number 2, Bitcoin needs to be trading above the weekly EMA ribbons at 26,600. Tick. Number 3, Bitcoin needs to be trading above the bull market support bands currently at 26,700. Tick. So the first 3 items on the list have already been ticked off. Let's talk about the other 4 things that I've got my eyes on in which I need to see to believe Bitcoin will be moving into a bull market. Number 4, I need to see this monumental resistance box which tops out around about 32,500 be flipped as support. I'd want to see price move above 32,500, have a correction back down to 32,500 and then make a higher high. If this is not ticked off, then in my opinion, in the macro, this resistance is still in full effect and we are still in a bear market. Number 5, I would need to see the DXY trading beneath 100 for at least a month or so. Now, keeping things nice, short and sweet, this box that we are currently holding as support between 103 all the way down to 100 is a monumental support box for the DXY. And if we're just talking about, in the past few years worth of trading history, if we come over to the yearly time frame, you can literally see for about 8 years, since 2015, this has been acting as resistance. This has been resistance in 2013, resistance in 2016, resistance in 2017, resistance in 2020. In 2022, we've flipped above it and we've come back down and held it as support. So as long as we're holding above 100, then in my opinion, it's not likely for equity markets or cryptocurrencies to continue their rally. So what I'd need to see for this to become ticked off is for the DXY to break underneath 100, flip it as resistance and continue down. Number 6, keeping things nice, short and sweet. I'd need to see the interest rates beneath 2.5%. If we're looking at the past 30 years worth of trading history, when the interest rates have been up here at 6.5%, 5.25%, and once again, we're here at 5.25%, historically, we just don't have bull runs from these levels. So while the interest rates are this high, I don't think it's very likely that we'll see a rally. However, if we come back to 2018, bear in mind, we're on a logarithmic growth curve chart. So the difference between this peak and this peak doesn't look too much, but this is actually a peak at 2.5%, and this is a peak at 5.25%, over double this peak. So take that into consideration. You can see that when the interest rates topped out at 5.25%, we did actually continue the rally for the equity market. So it is a possibility if the interest rates come down to 2.5% and exceed 2.5%, that could be another tick off the list, and that is the 6th thing that I need to see. I need to see the interest rates at/below 2.5%. And the final thing that I need to see institutional money once again flow back into Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of talk right now. There's a lot of ETFs which are being submitted left, right, and center. A leveraged Bitcoin ETF has just been approved as well. And a lot of people are talking about this rally being supported by institutional money flowing into Bitcoin. That's all I'm seeing on Twitter. I'm seeing people saying, the price is rallying right now because institutions are FOMOing into Bitcoin. Well, let's look at the whale wallets, the institutions. They're not really moving at all. This is not an institutional rally. If we're coming over to the Bitcoin ratio of retail to institutional addresses, This is at all-time highs. This is not an institution rally. Institutions aren't FOMOing into Bitcoin. Institutions aren't doing anything. They're sitting on the sidelines. And if we're coming over to, retail wallets or the Bitcoin ratio of retail to institutional addresses, these are hitting new all-time highs because we're not seeing institutional FOMO. We're seeing retail FOMO because of these ETFs. So the seventh thing I would need to see to be ticked off from my checklist is to start seeing institutional money flow back into Bitcoin. So there we go. That's my Bitcoin bull market checklist. The 7 different items that I would need to see ticked off to believe that Bitcoin is moving into a bull market. Now, let's dive into what's happening in the lower time frames and give you a quick update. So like we said in the previous video, we were short-term bullish until we hit the price target of 31,000. In the past 24 hours, we've hit 31,000. So am I still short-term bullish? Well, the answer is no. We've hit my bullish price target. In the lower time frames, like we said, we hit the bullish price target. I'm starting to see oscillators top out, and in the higher time frames we are at this monumental level of resistance. So let's break down the lower time frames to start with. Now, first of all, if we come over to the DXY, you can see that we've just completed a SFP bear flag pattern. So we've had a bear flag, we broke to the downside of this, and this ended up being a swing failure pattern. If we draw this line of support, this was support back on Thursday, support on Friday, we broke beneath this, and as you can see, we had a quick swing failure pattern. We broke to the downside, found support on the 786 Fibonacci, and had a very quick reversal back up to the upside. We are now above the 618 fib in terms of this fib channel parallelogram, and in my opinion, we are due for further continuation back up to the upside. The next level of interest I've got over on the DXY is the 0.5 Fibonacci at 102.85. If we do manage to exceed this level, do bear in mind we do have a very, very important level to clear, which is starting at round about 102.94. If we do manage to exceed that level, I do believe the DXY is going to be heading up for that next macro level to the upside. Do bear in mind, for the past month or so, since the beginning of June, the DXY has been moving down and it's finally found a level of support before bouncing back up to the upside. This is why we've seen the equity markets rally for the past few weeks. This is why we've seen Bitcoin rally for the past few weeks. If the DXY does continue up from this level, then, all of these markets could be stopped out where they stand. So let's dive into Bitcoin now. Like we said, we hit 31,000. I'm no longer short-term bullish, and here is why. First of all, daily time frame, stochastic RSI, it is starting to turn to the downside as we have hit the 31,000 price target. Also, in my opinion, in the lower time frames, there's not really any other price targets that I've got my eyes on. Of course, in the macro time frame, we have highlighted there is a slim possibility we could go as high as 32,500. In the macro, we're not too far away from this, but in my opinion, this is really where we top out. I personally think Bitcoin has topped out in the lower time frames now. It's not necessary to move up to 32,500. I just want to highlight potentially it is possible. There is a slim chance that we can move up to 32,500 before moving back down to the downside. However, in the lower time frames, you are seeing the oscillators top out. Now, if we look at what's happened the last few times oscillators have topped out, bear in mind, sometimes they make lower lows, sometimes they make lower highs, sometimes they invalidate the structure. All I'm really highlighting is corrections are due on the BTC USD chart when you do approach this 100 mark over on the stochastic RSI, and you do have that bearish flip back down to the downside. And also, while we've come up and hit this price target up at 31,000, which we told you we would be short-term bullish until it hits, I also want to highlight in the 4-hour time frame, we almost hit 31,000. We came up to 30,800 before having a correction. Then we pushed up to 31,450, where at least in the past 24 hours, we have seen a local top for Bitcoin. Now, since this has been playing out, you can see a top in the price action and you can see a higher high in the price action. Now for the oscillator on the MFI came up to 97 on the 4-hour time frame. Tons of money flew into this market and it is very, very overextended right now. What I'm really highlighting is the price action has highs and higher highs, and the oscillator has highs, lower highs, and it looks like it's coming up to make a lower high right now as we're seeing a short-term bounce on the 4-hour time frame. So what this is a classic case of regular bearish divergence which is playing out. So like we said, Bitcoin has hit the short-term bullish price target up at 31,000. We're seeing daily stochastic RSI top out. On the 4-hour time frame, we're seeing bearish divergence. This is really letting me know that we should be breaking down to the downside. Now, before I do give a quick update on what is happening in the higher time frames, I want to talk about my price targets and how quickly do I think we could be heading down to the downside? Now, unfortunately, I think things are going to be boring for the next week. If we look at the tops that happen in the stochastic RSI, when they come up to these overextended levels, what you normally see is a sharp breakdown to the downside for about 3 or 4 days. Then you see a bounce back up to the upside for like 4 days before seeing that next monumental level back down to the downside. If we come over to these stochastic RSI tops, you can see we had a top in the stock, we broke down for about 2 days, we just went sideways for another 1 day, we broke down, bounced back up, and then proceeded to break down. So a lot of the time it takes about a week for the stochastic RSI to actually, start having an effect on the price action. Of course, we top out, we chop to the side, we break down a bit, we bounce back up, and then we have that next move back down to the downside. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're just going to be rushing down to lower price targets immediately. I think things are going to be very, very boring for the next week, unfortunately. So with that said, I think in the immediate short term, Bitcoin is very likely to move down to this resistance box. Well, this was previous resistance all the way back up here when we were forming this descending wedge. This is probably going to act as short-term support as we do come down to 29,500. I think for the next few days or so, we could break down about another $1,000 down to 29.5 before finding a short-term level of support, at which point I think this bearish divergence on the 4-hour would be playing out. I think the stochastic RSI would be ready to turn down. We could see a very short-term bounce, and at this time I think about 5 days worth of trading action is going to pass before breaking back down to the next level between about 28,400 down to about 27,700, at which point we could see the 4-hour time frame reset. We could see a small bounce back up to 28,500 before breaking down to my first major price target right here on the 200-week moving average. This could literally take about a week or so to get down to, maybe 2 weeks, unless there's any FUD or news associated with a breakdown. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for us to come back down to around about 26,800. But at least in terms of the most important price targets, down here at 26,800 is my next major prediction for Bitcoin. Bear in mind, like I said, I think we're going to ebb and flow between some of these support and resistance zones for the next week or so. I unfortunately think it's going to be a boring week ahead for Bitcoin. Like I said, I think things are going to be pretty boring for the next week or so, so we won't spend any more time on the lower time frames. Let's dive into the macro though. Now in the macro, I think there's going to be some significant moves happening in the next few weeks. Bear in mind, it could take like I said, about 7 to 14, maybe 21 days to start playing out, because we are at some critical macro resistances right now. For the total altcoin market cap, you can see we are currently trading on the weekly time frame just underneath the 200-week moving average. If we do get a close underneath here, then in about a week or so, we might see a significant drop to the downside for altcoins. Well, altcoins can drop against Bitcoin. Obviously, altcoins are very, very weak right now. If we come over to the Bitcoin dominance, the Bitcoin dominance is skyrocketing up to this price target we've been presenting for absolutely ages now. 53%. We're not too far away from this right now. This is about a 2% move up for the dominance. But yeah, I think the Bitcoin dominance is going to continue flying. My price target on the dominance for quite some time now, or should I say percent target, is all the way up here at the 618 fib at 60%. Now this is a macro move, of course. I don't think we're going to be here next week, but this is about a 16% increase for the dominance. Really, this just translates to altcoins are likely to get slaughtered. Now, like I said, for the next week, I don't think there's going to be much movement for Bitcoin. I personally think altcoins will start moving sooner. I think altcoins are getting ready to get rejected on things like weekly EMA ribbons, bull market support bands, 200-week moving averages, and I think we're very likely to move all the way back down to this trend line before losing it. I think that we're probably, in the next week or two, going to move all the way back down to 500 billion, which is a 10% correction. You could see a lot of altcoins in the red in the next 7 to 14 days. Now, in the higher time frames for Bitcoin, like I stated, we are in this monumental level of resistance right now. And like I said in the bull market checklist, unless we exceed 32,500 and have a bullish impulse creating higher highs above this resistance, in my opinion, the macro for Bitcoin is unchanged and we're still at this major resistance. But what I will highlight is this could potentially be an SFP pattern for Bitcoin. If we look at this most recent top that we had for Bitcoin, all the way back up here at 31,000 before having that correction down to 25,000, you can see that we bounced all the way back up and just created a slight higher high, but we've had a sharp projection. We've got 4-hour bearish divergence playing out. The oscillators are starting to top out. So I believe this is going to end up being a SFP pattern, a swing failure pattern. And in this, I think we're very, very likely to have a very sharp move back down to the downside in the next, 7 to 14 days. Like I previously said, unfortunately, I think the next week's going to be boring. That is what it is. I could be wrong on that. We could start moving down very, very quickly. In general, my price targets are at lower levels. Unfortunately, I just think for the next few days, maybe the next 5-7 days, things are going to be boring. But with that said, after we do get that chop, I think this is going to end up being an SFP. Potentially after a retest of 30,500, we're going to have a horrible, sharp move back down to the downside. Remember how, if we clear up this chart again, we had a SFP swing failure pattern underneath this falling wedge, and then we had a sharp move to the upside. I think just like we had a SFP liquidity grab down here, this is going to be an SFP liquidity grab to the upside, and we're very likely to just start moving back down to 26, 25,000, potentially even taking out these lows at 24,750. Like we said though, in the macro, we are at this major level of resistance, and we've got two support and resistance boxes drawn out here. Number one, this is the red box. This is much more encompassing than this smaller resistance box that we've got in orange. This orange one starts to top out at this resistance here at 31,100. But what you can see is we had, like we said, that SFP, we exceeded this wick here, but we are currently underneath that wick once again. So if we do close a weekly candle body underneath the resistance at $31,132 for Bitcoin, if we close beneath that level on the weekly time frame, I think this is going to be a very, very ugly close, and I think we're very likely in the macro to have a sharp move back down to the downside. Let's tie a different market into the Bitcoin macro analysis before diving back into Bitcoin. If we look at the put to call oscillator, of course, we quite often discuss the options market and the put to call ratio. What I want to highlight right now is that we are extremely in the negative for the put to call ratio. Now, typically when you come down into the negative for the put to call ratio, this is often associated with a lot of macro tops in the market. So for example, if I'm just highlighting these major moves to the downside in the put to call ratio, bear in mind they don't always exactly call every single top very, very precisely. These are kind of like a macro oscillator. They kind of give you an idea like, hey, if you're trading on a 2x leverage short, you're probably in a very safe position at this moment in time. You can see every single time the put to call oscillator comes down to these major levels to the downside, you typically see these macro tops develop in Bitcoin. Sometimes they're lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. Sometimes we break the structure and it's a higher high and a higher high. Either way, like I said, my bull market checklist. Even if we do manage to flip 32,500 and break into a new bull market, at least this chart is letting me know that if that is the case, we're at least due for a correction in the immediate short term before that happens. Now let's clear up this chart. We quickly talked about the options market. That's really all I want to touch on. I also want to talk about a different way that you can draw a Fibonacci we've been looking at for quite some time now. So we've of course been looking at this Fibonacci right here from the swing low of the bear market all the way up to the swing high, and I was looking at some of the Fibonacci levels over on this fib, and I was noticing they're not always 100% on the money. Sometimes they are. For example, this 786 Fibonacci held relatively well. This was a quick SFP back up to the upside. But if we do come over to the weekly time frame for a slightly different drawing, bear in mind this is drawn to the monthly close right down here after we had that pandemic scare. If we come over to the weekly time frame, you can see once we held the 786, we held it as support, we held it as support, we held it as support, flipped it as resistance, SFP broke back up, held the 786 as support. We've been getting rejected against the 618 Fibonacci, and also quite interestingly, you can see resistance at the 786, the 618 was support, flipped as resistance. This is also a fib which has been thoroughly respected, and we are once again at the resistance of this 618 fib. This is just an interesting idea, not my main take on the markets, just wanted to present a different perspective. 30,364, this is where this Fibonacci level is coming at the 618 fib. Wrapping up the video with the last two charts, if we come over to the MACD, you can see that we've recently had a bullish flip, and what I've noticed is since the bull market top for Bitcoin, what you see is these brutal drawdowns in the MACD, and when you typically have these bullish flips, they normally only last about a week. You see a bullish flip, you see a rally for about a week, and then you see that overextension happen. You see the markets break back down to the downside. This is of course in bear markets. In a bull market, if you have a bullish MACD flip, you often get very strong moves to the upside. In a bear market, a bullish MACD flip is often a sign of overextension, as the weekly MACD is a lagging indicator, and then you see that bearish MACD flip break back down, and once you finally see that bearish MACD flip after the bullish MACD flip, that's typically when you see that next break back down to the downside. So I want to highlight over here we saw a MACD flip to the upside, over here we saw a MACD flip to the upside. Right now on this week we're seeing a MACD flip to the upside. In all of these scenarios we had 1 week of upside before breaking back down. We had 1 week of upside before breaking back down. We've clearly had 1 week of upside after this MACD flip. I think the next week, like I said, I think it's going to be slow and choppy for the next week or so, but I think Bitcoin is long overdue a macro correction. Our final chart, what I want to highlight in terms of what price targets I'm looking at, of course, you know I've got my eyes on the 200-week moving average, which is going to be coming in round about 26,800. But the next level to the downside from there is a level that we've very clearly respected on these charts. We came back down to this 2 weeks ago, 24,900. Now, coming into the next week, this is going to be round about, 24,700 or so. Really round about this 25,000. I've given you a lot of reasons why we should come down here. In terms of the 200-week moving average, that's going to be round about 27,000. In terms of the weekly EMA ribbons, these are going to be round about 26,000. In terms of the bull market support bands, 26,000 support as well. So really in the next macro move, I see us coming down to 27, 26, and then breaking back down to 25. As we do come back down to 25, I'll let you know what my updated thoughts are in the market. In terms of the macro price targets, this head and shoulders for me is pretty much invalidated. So it doesn't look like, 24,000 is going to be a significant price target, but this major CME gap down here at 20,200, in my opinion, is still completely valid. And while this is a little bit ugly right now, if we do have a sharp rejection to the downside, this could still definitely be a bark pattern with a price target down at 19,500. So there we go, my friends. Those are my thoughts on the lower time frames for Bitcoin and the higher time frames and the DXY and the options market sentiment. All of that good stuff. You know my bull market checklist. You know exactly what I need to see to change my bearish ideas on Bitcoin. You know what I proceed to believe to happen in Bitcoin. Obviously, we've hit my bullish price target, 31,000. We're seeing oscillators top out. We're seeing bearish divergences. We're seeing the DXY regain strength. For all these reasons, my friends, like I said, I think the next week's going to be a little bit boring, unfortunately. Hope I'm wrong on that front, but in general, I proceed to believe that we are going to break down level by level and come down to round about 25,000. So for today, my friends, that's all I've got. Hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely a little bit of a longer one today, but yeah, I did also want to encompass my bull market checklist, so it is out there. Everyone knows exactly what I need to see to pivot bullish in the markets. I get tons of questions about this over on Twitter, Discord, YouTube, etc. People asking me, now this has happened, what have my thoughts changed? Now this has happened, have my thoughts changed? Now you know exactly the 7 major things that I'm looking at that I really need to see before I can become a Bitcoin bull for the next cycle. Bear in mind, really higher time frames, I am a Bitcoin perma bull. I think Bitcoin goes to millions of dollars, but I just think, 14,000, I think this happens first. So nonetheless, that's all I've got for today, my friends. If you did enjoy the video, if you do enjoy my content, make sure to let me know down below by leaving a like and a comment. Share these videos with your friends. If you want to further support the channel, feel free to click the join button on YouTube and become a member today. Follow me over on Twitter at 618_cowboy. Spin your boy Cowboy Trades. I'm out. Peace.